Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Can everyone hear me? All right. I'm Harold Love Jr. I'm the pastor of Lee Chapel AME Church. I'm also state representative for District 58. But probably more importantly, down at 2109 Scovel Street, my grandmother, Lillian Love, owned a house in 1948. Subsequently, she sold it to my father, but then subsequently, he and my mother were forced to sell it to the government. Because like many others, the Interstate came through and they had no choice but to sign a warranty deed for $5,000 to sell their house, which of course prevented them passing down generational wealth. And so we have an opportunity today to talk about what could be done, what's possible, and how we might find a way to stop these cycles of generational wealth for African Americans being stopped. So let me pause here and introduce or recognize our elected officials. We have with us Council Lady at Large Sharon Hurt, Council Member Freddie O'Connell, Deputy Mayor Brenda Haywood, and Vice Mayor Jim Schulman, and of course our Mayor, Mayor Cooper. We also have with us former Council Member Ed Kendall, who has written a wonderful book about a walk down Jefferson Street, talking about how many efforts were made to keep our community together. On the program today, you will hear from other folks like Ken Chrisman, the owner of R&R Liquor Store. Also, President Van Newkirk from Fisk University. So I'm going to get out the way and let our program start, but let me say to you, this is an important day for our community. It's a chance for us to discuss. If you support the possibility of a cap over Jefferson Street, let us hear from you. If you don't support the possibility of a cap over Jefferson Street, let us hear from you. If you have questions and you want answers, the only way we'll know your questions is if we hear from you. It does no good for us to go into our silos, back to our homes and discuss about what we didn't want to see happen, and no one can hear your questions and let us solve these problems, all right?
Will you be calling on us? Will you be calling on us?
So this is not the question and answer session today. This is the first of many meetings.
What is today if it's not question and answer?
Today is the kickoff of the community-led design to talk about what we want to see possibly at this location.
When you just stated that you wanted to hear from us, when will that be?
That process will be explained in the explanation of next steps by Faye Demassimo.
Let me say this, Brother Pastor. We want to be heard.
Yes, sir.
We want to be heard while the meeting is.
Okay. All right, so let me say this to you. Faye Demassimo is in charge of that section. If this were Sunday morning or Wednesday, I would run the whole show. I'm being very serious, and I respect you. But there's other folks on the program who have assigned tasks. I think Faye Demassimo will address the issues of questions.
Get one of them to set aside 2 minutes for us.
Yes, sir.
I got friends here that are going to be speaking. They will defer their time for us.
I got you. All right. So next up for remarks is Mayor Cooper. All right, and then we'll make time for the questions. All right.
Well, thank you, Representative Love. Thank all of you all for being here. It's great to be here at Lee Chapel because this is where, on the morning of the March tornado, the community came together, and where we returned a year later to remember and reflect that Lee Chapel is where change happens. And I'm grateful to the Reverend and to the church for guiding that change and serving the community. As we all know, it's our leadership that allows us to be resilient. So it's fitting that we're back in this space to begin the work of discussing the community's thoughts on a proposed Jefferson Street Cap. Before we talk about the future of Jefferson Street, however, I think we should first acknowledge the historic harm that was done here. And to appreciate the magnitude of that harm, we have to talk about what Jefferson Street was. That throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, there was no place in America like it. It was sacred space, a sanctuary for the formerly enslaved during Reconstruction, and then the home of 3 iconic HBCUs. A place of spiritual support with some of Tennessee's oldest black churches. World-class music and nightlife. It was an incubator for the civil rights movement in Nashville and from here to the nation. And despite the cruel injustices of the so-called urban renewal and redlining, despite generations of underinvestment and neglect, Jefferson Street was Nashville's most vibrant and culturally important neighborhood. And that was before I-40 cut this proud community in half. And I-40, it's hard to even read this, what happened. I-40 destroyed 100 square blocks across North Nashville. 16 blocks of stores and venues along Jefferson. 1,400 residents were immediately displaced, and you heard the story Representative Love tells how his father, Representative Love Sr., fought against it. And Representative Love Sr. and his wife, Ms. Love, lived right on Scovel Street, a block from Jefferson, when I-40 came through, and that house is now a missing piece of a dead-end street. Within a year after that, property values in the neighborhood fell nearly by a third. And our HBCU corridor was fragmented. And as the great Reverend Kelly Miller Smith said, I-40 was a bitter thing which tore the community apart. Now we today are acknowledging that bitter thing. And we look for guidance in taking restorative action. In every way imaginable, I-40 was something that was done to North Nashville. But a Jefferson Street Cap would be something Nashville does for this community, but with your consideration, your partnership, your input, and your design. This project belongs to North Nashville. Discussion of the Cap has a single purpose: to consider how we can physically reunite this neighborhood, restore it. And as you decide what the Cap would look like, should look like, how it would function and feel, the Metro government is here to listen and to serve and to support your vision. And once you're spoken, we're here to make sure your decisions are put into action. Now, beyond this project, Metro has more work to do in North Nashville. And I want to spend just a few minutes on that subject, because first, Metro is investing in 261 traffic and transportation improvements in North Nashville. That is 5 major road paving projects, 116 culvert projects for better stormwater drainage, 2 bridge projects, 61 traffic calming applications, 12 better bus routes, and 14 priority sidewalk networks, and 51 priority bike networks. And also the people of North Nashville are working, and I see Councilman Taylor here in the front row. It's driven by his inspiration, in large part, to a $2 million participatory budgeting project. Now that project is the first for our city, where the North Nashville community decides what additional infrastructure projects get funded with that $2 million, and we hope to continue this first effort with succeeding efforts in that direction. So the Jefferson Street Cap can be a powerful community project, because what we build, where we build, with the respect and intention we put into building it, it is all an opportunity, our opportunity to honor this community. And I want to thank all our faith and community leaders who care so deeply about this project, who are here today. I'm grateful to each of you for joining in this network. I'm grateful to President Newkirk for being here. I think I-40 was a historic harm to Fisk, which is almost unbelievable that that could have happened. But let us begin the journey to restore and to rebuild and to heal from that event, but it's with your guidance that can happen. Only with your guidance and design and participation can that happen. With that, thank you very much. I'm grateful to be here, and then thank you, Reverend Love. On with the rest of our program. Thank you.
All right, we have Councilmember Hurt coming up next, followed by Mr. Chrisman, Councilmember Taylor, and then President Newkirk.
Good morning. Good afternoon. And good evening too. I'm a member of Lee Chapel AME Church. And I love my pastor. And I need for him to pray for me. I was on my way here trying to decide what it is that I was going to say. Because I've often said that Jefferson Street and Sharon Hurt's life is parallel. We've been knocked down, but not knocked out. This pains me. Those of us who have worked, those of us who have invested, those of us who live, those of us who volunteer and provide our services in this community, were not a part of the initial conversation. That pains me. We say what this is to look like. So it sounds like it's already a deal. What it feels like. They fought against the Interstate, went to the Supreme Court. You hear that? It's the Interstate. I could go on and on and on about this. And I thought that I was actually going to come up in the on the program a little bit later. So my comments basically are geared to that. But having worked in this community for JUMP, the Jefferson Street United Merchants Partnership, for 22 years, working for Meharry Medical College for 19 years, because I worked there 2 years when I was a student at Tennessee State University, for which I was there for 4 years. So you can add all of that up. But as council member at large, I have expressed my views openly to the mayor's office, asking for intentional community engagement since the first grant application. I do not agree with the way the mayor's office has gone about this process. Let me say that again. I do not agree with the way the mayor's office has gone about this process. I believe the first grant application should have included community engagement from the start. To begin community engagement with a second round application seems a little too little and too late. The citizenry deserves consistent transparency. I understand that community engagement is being done now, and I hope that you will be sure to ensure that your voice is heard at planned events. My personal stance is that affordable housing should always come first in this community because I have attended hundreds of meetings and no one has said that they wanted a cap. They said they wanted affordable housing. Before anything else, I think that needs to be addressed. For those who want to own as well as those who want to rent. But it's too expensive. There's also the issue of delayed displacement. Now what I mean about that is that if, like the Interstate, the cap is built, while people may not be displaced today, this year, or next year, when the cap comes and it makes it beautiful here and it's absolutely wonderful and the value goes up, then people are going to be displaced because they're not going to be able to afford it, and we won't be able to have TSU Homecoming Parade. I do not necessarily see how the cap is going to benefit this community. I do believe when we have challenges, we're supposed to find opportunities in it, and I'm still looking for them. Until the mayor's office can articulate that value, I will remain in the position of questioning the intent, the value, and the time of this. I believe, and I'm so glad, Mayor, that you are working with Fisk and that you do have and share that same love. Because I think that Fisk has been omitted, disregarded far too long. It is time for the city to put their arms around and cherish this wonderful treasure, Fisk University. Ultimately, we need to have, I say, in what happens in North Nashville. North Nashville, not North Gulch, not So we need to engage to hear from the horse's mouth, learn, understand, and then communicate what we want. I can tell you this little story, and I'm going to sit down because I don't know how much time I was supposed to have. But y'all know Miss Suggs. Y'all know Miss Stewart. And they told me long time ago, because, you know, I walked up and down the street plenty of times talking to them. And they said they fought the Interstate, of course, and they lost. I'm from Memphis. They tried to do the same thing in one of the affluent areas there, but did it happen? No, it didn't. The Interstate runs right off on Cooper because it was not going to happen there. But before the Interstate, they were talking to the government, and they said they wanted to bring outhouses over here in North Nashville. And the people here said, we don't want outhouses, we want a place to store our corn, because that's how we make our money. Y'all know about that corn whiskey, but I ain't gonna go there. But they said that we wanted a place to store our corn. They said you need outhouse. This is the new thing. This is the thing going. It's going to make more value to the community. They said we want a place to store our corn. They come up one day, and what do they see? Outhouses all over the place. And then they came back to inspect to see how everything was going with the new outhouses, and what did they see? All the corn was stored in the outhouses. Your opinion matters and has a direct effect on what happens in our community. I want to say that if we're not at the table, we will not be able to put our voices into action. Better yet, if we're not at the table, we on the menu.
Good afternoon. I did not officially prepare any remarks. I came to actually observe this process of this meeting and see what it's about and see what other people think. But I know for myself, as what I consider a legacy business owner in this area, running some 72 years this coming year. You can't hear me? All right, can you hear me now? I consider this situation to be one that's offering some type of opportunity. Also, I go at it with caution. I'm cautiously optimistic about it because I want to see what the functionality of this particular development will be. Be honest with you, I don't feel like that this was necessarily planned for us to be a part of. I've seen a lot of businesses come and go on Jefferson Street in my 45 years there. And so I want to find out exactly what we're talking about. Also, I want to have a say in what I think should be a part of this cap. I think there should be some functionality associated with this food desert that exists in North Nashville. I think there should be some functionality as far as dealing with some aspect of what this homeless situation is going to be, because that's going to affect the development. I mean, there's going to be those people are displaced, and they're going to be in that area. And in conjunction with that, we need to look at the safety aspect of it, because there needs to be a situation that exists where we understand that there's safety for the people that are going to be working and inhabiting or living or traversing this particular area. So it's about 3 acres from my understanding. I looked online to see what kind of opportunities are available for those kinds of situations, and I just know that those particular applications that I mentioned earlier are what I consider critical. So I don't know, I'm still observing and seeing what's happening and observing the process. I know I participated in the Sub-Area 8 planning process with Ms. Suggs for years gone by. And one thing I will say about that particular process was that we were making plans, but we were not aware of the availability, or no way was made available for us to take advantage of this wave of development that came through. It was kind of like if you make it, you make it. If you don't, you don't. So I want to see what's available, and I want to understand what our opportunities are, and I want to know how we can be a part of what's going to be, or what's going to come out of it. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I'm a little stiff getting up, but I did want to get here and say what we could talk about. Can everyone hear me? I'm an old lynching historian, so I know about the politics of displacement. I know about the politics of being disadvantaged. I've written about it for years. But as president of a university, a small university that has a national base, there's so many things that impact us that we have to talk about. I don't have prepared remarks, but I do want to say these things. Each day when I get into my office, I get about 5 to 10 calls or emails about parents concerned about safety for their children. And it's really important for me, as we bring in more students and we grow as a university, that we have safety and we have some of the things that are really key to providing safety for a university and for our kids. And quite often, when I see newspaper reports and I look out my window and there's a murder on our campus or there's a drive-by shooting on our campus, it creates concern for me. Now, while I don't know all the details about the plan, there are certain aspects of the plan I will support. As we talk about a community building that the university and the community could share, I think that's important for us to know each other, to get to know each other, and to have some of those things as a shared community. But there are other parts of this that, as others have said, I do believe the community needs to come together and help plan those actions, because that's important. I think it's important for us as a university to have that type of recognition and to have that type of safety and community buy-in. So for us, we think it's a good first step, but we also think it's a step that has to have community buy-in and community support. And we at Fisk, we stand ready to join with the community as we do this whole thing to make a safer and a better environment for our students as we grow as a university. So what I'll say is that now we're somewhat on the fence, but we do agree with many aspects, but there are other pieces that we do recognize that we do need community buy-in, and we stand ready to work with our community partners. So thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councilmember Brandon Taylor. Welcome to North Nashville. And to many, hello to my neighbors. Glad to see you all out here. Councilmember Hurt, thank you for your words. Councilmember O'Connell, thank you for being here. Mayor, thank you. So I'm gonna be very brief in my comments because what I've heard prior to today and what I've heard just a smidgen of today, we actually want to hear from you and not me, right? And so I'm not gonna be long. I learned that term from Representative Love. I'm not gonna be. That's a preacher term. I'm not gonna be long. And another thing I learned was points from Representative Love, right? So we're gonna hit a few points. So let's think about point one. We want to hear from you. And so engagement is extremely important. As we talk about developing, changing the face of your community, we have to engage with the community. We can't leave you out. We can't forget about you. This has been a conversation for quite some time. I think you've probably read some of the readings in the paper or in other places. And we're now having a conversation with the community. I think we could have got here a lot sooner, but we're here today, but we're gonna have to listen to you. That's point one, engagement. The only way your voice is gonna be heard is if you engage, and that goes to number two. Point number two is we have to listen. This is your community. I live here too, but as a representative, I lost all the voting power. I gotta listen to you, right? I can't make my own choices, my own decisions. My job is to roll with the community. How the community feels, no matter what my personal preferences are. So number one, we gotta engage. Number two, we gotta listen. And the last portion is, you gotta talk to us. So it's exciting to see so many people here today that are gonna talk to us, that are gonna give us their voice. And we're going to listen. As your representative, I'm going to bring your ideas. I'm going to give you opportunity to listen. I'm going to push the mayor and everyone else that makes these decisions. Sometimes it's out of the council's hand. We haven't actually had a chance to visit this as a council. Am I correct, Councilmember Hurt, Councilmember O'Connell? So it hasn't landed necessarily in the council's hands. But we have to listen to you all to then advocate for what you want. And so the reason I wanted to be brief, I'm closing right now. So the reason I wanted to be brief was because we're going on 12:40. It's an hour program, and that only gives you 20 more minutes to give me your thoughts. So for the rest of the program, after we get done talking, we want to listen to you, okay? Thank you all.
Thank you Thank you, Brandon. I'll try to speak up. North Nashville knows how to do community engagement the right way. That is not telling us we need to hear things that are hard to hear. And I'm grateful to Council Lady Hurt for saying things that are hard to hear. But I want to provide a little bit of context for today's conversation. What we're talking about is a federal grant. It's the federal government that did this with I-40, and now there's a federal grant program that perhaps, with your input, provides money for some healing. The federal government is going to spend this money in some cities in America. Question is, do we make an effective application and ask for it here, or does it go to another city? Only with your input, concurrence, and approval does this go forward to the federal government. Now, there'll be some metro help required because most projects require a little bit of local participation, but the bulk of this is a federal grant money that they are giving out in Washington, and that's what's at stake. I wish this money could be used for affordable housing or some of our other crisis needs in our community. But exactly, and we can insist on that. And access to capital. But this fundamentally is a federal DOT grant that hopefully will be in the March cycle next year of applying for it. But you're going to help write that application. Should we apply for it and to say, yes, Nashville can use the help, it's a historic injury being done here, we should be at the top of the application pool from that standpoint. But again, I'm grateful to each of you, and community engagement is often things that are hard to hear. So thank you, Faye, and then I know there's speakers here in the program, and we'll be here longer because of the interest in the community. Thank you.
I know Councilmember Taylor mentioned that I know that some folks have some time limitations today and need to leave early, but if you're here and you want to stay and talk, NDOT is going to be here to talk with you. We won't leave. We'll stay till you're done talking. So, my name's Faye Demassimo, and I'm the interim director of the brand new Metro Nashville Department of Transportation and Multimodal Infrastructure. It's an honor to be here in this community today, and an honor to have the opportunity to hear from you about whether you want this cap, and if you want this cap, what do you want it to look like. And I want to be able to talk a little bit about what those opportunities are going to look like moving forward, both today and over the next months, for you to be able to tell us exactly those things. So if you look at the table over here, the end table, if you happen to pick up one of these cards, you will note that there is 2 community meetings that have already been established, October 28th and November 4th, where there will be regular sort of broad community meetings for input. We also started stakeholder interviews about a month and a half ago, and so many of you may have already, through organizations that you belong to that are representative of the community in this area particularly, you may have also had some opportunity to input in some of those stakeholder conversations that we know are important and are going to continue over the coming months. In addition, you've heard many of the speakers talk about, including Mayor Cooper, referencing about the history of this area and how important it is to Metro Nashville. One of the things that we want to do with as a part of getting your input is to create an oral history of this area, to tell your stories and record those stories about this community, what it was, what it is, and what you want it to be. And I know the other thing that we have heard some about today is that there are other issues in this community that are important. Affordable housing is important. Crime is important. Having access to sidewalks so you can get to places where you need and want to go, to transit, having safe roads for cars to travel on. All those things are important, and we understand that. And one of the things that we are also doing is making sure that we're considering all of those things as a part of investments in this community. We're very proud to have just worked with Dr. Newkirk. He brought to our attention, the Fisk team brought to our attention some issues around campus safety at Fisk, And we are in process now of rolling out a project with him that involves a lot of pedestrian and traffic management and things that we'll be doing that will improve that. But I wanted you to hear that affordable housing in particular is something that I know Councilmember Hurt hit on. We have partnerships that we are engaging. This grant is just not sort of the one and done. This grant should be thought of, if we go after it, if you decide that you want to, should be thought of as a leveraging point for the community. So, for example, Amazon has made a commitment around affordable housing, and we are working with them now to figure out how that works with our transit system and our existing transit lines, and how we can be sure on a project like this or other projects, how we can be sure we're leveraging that potential investment they want to make into affordable housing that is also paired with the transportation infrastructure that makes sure that you can get to the places that you both want and need to go. So I want to thank you all so much for being here today, and to tell you a little bit about what we're doing today. So today is really, as Councilmember Taylor brought up, we got to listen. Today's all about listening. And so just as we did with the transportation plan, we didn't come to the community with a plan and say, here's the plan, what do you think? We came to the community all across Metro and said, what do you think? What do you want to see? And we crafted a plan accordingly. We will do the same here. The starting point is over here, and all we're trying to do today is, again, the opportunity is for you to talk about, do you want a cap or not want a cap, or do you want to go, what is a cap? Because we've actually had that question quite a bit too. And if you also want to think about not only what is a cap, but what it could look like and what might be on it and what is really what the community needs and wants, then we've got a whole series of different kinds of opportunities and various visual pictures, photos that represent those opportunities to help create your conversation, to be able to tell us, yeah, that looks like what I'm thinking of. And we also have a completely blank, this is a little interesting, these tools, when we use them, and I try to avoid talking like a bureaucrat, but we call them visual preference surveys. But what's really unique about this one is we have a blank board over here, and if you don't see anything on these boards that looks like anything you want, then draw it for us. We want it to look like and see what it would be from your eyes, not from ours, if you want a cap at all. So thank you all so much for the opportunity to be here today. Yes, sir.
My name is Ronnie Mitchell. I'm a lifelong resident of Nashville in Davidson County. I'm pastor of New Livingstone Church in East Nashville, where we've been privileged to serve for 40 years. Not since the civil rights movement of the 60s has there been an issue on the table that can galvanize us and bring us together around a common cause. To all of the elected officials, my colleague and longtime friend Harold Love, his daddy and my daddy were friends. Mayor Cooper and my longtime sister in Christ, Brenda Haywood. Look, you all, in 1956, under the presidential administration of Dwight Eisenhower, a civil rights infraction was committed. They violated our civil rights, and all over the country, they brought interstates and highways through communities of color. It brought us to ruin. It took from us the ability to hand down generational wealth. The interstate, the people that were affected by it are dead and gone, or either they moved out. This development will benefit folk that are new to North Nashville, not just black folk. And what I say is, Mayor, I'm not going to fight against it. I will ask that we would rethink and reimagine it. That $120 million worth of money, let's have another $120 million in a separate pot to where we can do our own thing. I'm calling it the ABC Development Project. A is for affordable housing. B is for black business retention and recruitment. And C is for community compassion, okay? We must participate in our own rescue. The help we've been waiting on is here. The help we've been waiting on is us. But we must be a part of the equation. We must be in the conversation. Our civil rights have been violated. And I'm going to go and close right here because I feel the hoop coming on.
I know there's likely some other individuals that have comments.
$120 million. We can make it happen, but we got to stick together.
Talk about the process like federal, state, participation.
You want me to do it?
I can't.
Representative Love just asked me to explain a little bit about the particular grant that we are looking at if this project does become a project. It's called INFRA. It is a grant application that in the past is historically, it's gone for interstate type projects, but not for reconnecting community projects. The Biden administration, when elected, made reconnecting communities a high priority, understanding the devastation and as has been discussed here, all of the terrible things that occurred with interstates plowing through African American communities all across the country. And so it looks as though that there will be two potential funding sources. There's a grant that we know cycle is coming back up that is likely going to be suited for this. There's also the infrastructure bill that's pending before Congress now that will likely have a set aside in it specifically for reconnecting communities. So if we're ready, then we get in there.
Why was the previous application was denied? Why was it denied?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking that. So I'm going to try to make it a concise answer, and then we're going to get everybody started so everybody has an opportunity to give their input. And when you end at the table over here, there's comment cards. So anything and everything you want us to hear, please be sure to record that. The last application was denied, as you all recall, the Biden administration, the inauguration was in January. Secretary Buttigieg was confirmed in February. Immediately, they rolled out the INFRA grant app because that was the funding tool to get out there. It was a pre-existing grant program, and they rolled it out in March with it due the end of March, so really quick turnaround time. And what it did was it stated in there the intentions of the new administration around wanting to reconnect communities, social equity, climate change, improving safety, all those things. Over in the part of the application where you calculate the cost benefit, it's just a number crunching thing. They didn't change that part of it to reflect some of the new policy aspirations that the administration had, again, because everything had been happening so quickly. We pointed that out during the application process, and we have continued to have conversations with the administration around that topic, and they have been we've actually offered them some very helpful points to consider, and our expectation is that when INFRA comes out again in the spring, especially if it's still called INFRA or if they rename it something different, that the consideration of these kinds of projects will now be incorporated into the rating criteria in what's called the cost benefit analysis, and the project would actually do very well. I will tell you this, we had a debrief, and in the debrief we were told that this project ranked among the highest in the country on social equity, on climate change, and on innovation. But we didn't measure up on the cost benefit analysis because they were still measuring against the criteria that had always been. They just hadn't had a chance to catch up to the policy aims of this administration. Does that make sense?
Thank you, baby.
All right. Thank you. Representative Love would like to close.
Well, I want to add something to it. I know a lot of folks have asked, what is a cap? We use the term multimodal, we use the term interstate cap. The best way I can explain it is this. If you look at the D.B. Todd Bridge right now, it connects Scovel Street to Jefferson Street. A cap, if the community wants a cap, essentially would expand the bridge from 18th on top of the interstate all the way down to 17th. Also, nothing private can be built on the cap. So you can't have private development. You can only have public development. That's important to note. I don't want folks thinking that if we choose to go with the cap, then you're going to have a private developer building homes up there or condos or businesses that cannot be afforded. So I just want to provide the clarity for what the cap is, what a cap is, what a multimodal cap looks like, also where it would be. and the relationship between the federal, state, and local government. As the mayor said, it's a federal grant. Here's the link though. The highway is owned and operated and maintained by the state. So the State Department of Transportation has agreed that if we apply for the cap, if we get the money, they can build it in a time frame between 30 and 36 months. That is also where we have conversations about minority participation in the build out. The DBE programs for the state. That's where we also keep the state honest about who's going to be building the cap. That's where we have conversations about make sure that our folks are actually building if we choose to go that direction. So I want to provide that clarity about what a cap is, where it would potentially be, and who actually participates in those various parts, funding from the federal government and local, and then also the building would be done by the state. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Holloway from Harris Medical College called me and asked me who's going to own it. Who's going to own it now? Which I couldn't tell you.
As far as maintaining it,
No, who owns it? Is it going to be owned by the state or is it going to be owned by the city or home? Because, we did the Gateway to Heritage.
sure.
And it's still the state's property, but Tennessee State University and Harris Medical College
Right.
have to maintain it.
Right.
The city just comes and evaluate how well we do.
So take most of our bridges like this one. Unfortunately, the state has not maintained it. As you know, there's a relation between the state and Metro, that Metro can sometimes rename bridges, but it's really the state's job to rename those, but also maintain those. And it's an odd relationship situation because it's over the interstate that's maintained by the state. So that becomes part of state property. I know we have many more questions.
We will own the state.
Okay. So Faye said that Metro will own the cap. How much is the projected amount that the local government will spend?
It will be 40%. It'll be, we would go after a 40%. If it's 120 million, we'd be getting 72 million federal and 48 million would come from other sources, and that would be local and other sources.
All right. Also, a very important announcement. Someone left their phone. Oh, there you go. All right, we got that taken care of. Also want to acknowledge former Councilmember Ludi Wallace was here. And, all right. And we also have Salita Holloway, the Vice President of Meharry Medical College, who is here also. All right, so listen. Now's the time when we get to talking about the importance of this. I'm grateful for everybody showing up. I'm grateful for everybody voicing their concerns. All right? I'm very serious about that. We've been members of Lee Chapel since I was born. As I already stated earlier, my parents' house on Scovel was taken by the Interstate. I still live on Buchanan. This is still my neighborhood. And so I want to hear your voice because you got to be a part of the process. Let me say it's a very important part though. Whatever decision we make is our decision. And we own that decision.
And we live with it.
And we live with it.
That's why we want the other 120 million.
I understand.
All right.
But whatever decision we make, all right? I've heard folks say it's going to increase gentrification. That's where we also have conversations to say to our neighbors, don't sell your property. And this is also, we've asked for many years for amenities in North Nashville. We've asked for grocery stores. We have to also work toward getting more amenities in North Nashville. All right? So we have the section. Please, if you haven't signed in, please sign in. And also, now we go to the part for the stations. All right? So, again, I know I've said this one time before.
So are there no more questions?
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Ask your question. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, is everybody's hearts clear? I thought this was a community where you're going to have them.
All right.
You seem like you're trying to rush it. The one thing I want to know, who came up with the poster? Who came up with the design?
Okay.
Was that people from our community?
All right.
Was that part of the regentification community? Who came up with the designs for us to add in to say this is what we could choose from minority? Because white women are minorities.
If you stand with me, please,
Oh, sorry. I just want to make sure that when you talk about minorities, that African Americans are going to be part of that minority circle. Because when you think about what's in this community now, and that it is just so interesting that now is the time that we're talking about a cap. Now, I've lived here for almost 30 years, and this has always been this way in this neighborhood. And now that it's regentified, we're getting the bike lanes, we're getting the sidewalks, we're getting things that should have already been here, but now it's here. So when you talk about minority, I want to make sure that you're talking about African American minority and who's sitting at the table to make that happen. Because if I think about what Representative Hurt said, we weren't at the table at the beginning. So that is important. If you want to hear our voices, I think you need African Americans, and we have to really be clear on that. It's just not the community, because our community is mixed right now. So we need African Americans that's at that table that's going to challenge the conversation to where we're bringing in things that's going to benefit this community, and we don't want to just have it given to us if we pick a number. You want this, because that's already been decided. So that was just my comment.
Sure. And let me answer this question for you. First of all, I was in no way trying to rush anybody.
Well, that was my thought, because now you're moving into this, and my heart was, is everybody's hearts clear?
I know, and I'm trying to address everything you said. 'Cause I wrote down some of it. Somebody can give me that so I can address the rest of this. So I'm not trying to rush anybody. All right? You got all day to stay here. I'm serious. This is Lee Chapel's property. You have all day to stay here and look at all the screens. Okay?
But that's not asking questions.
I know.
Because you guys will be gone. So I want to make sure that the people who want to have their questions answered, that they have that opportunity.
I hear you, and I'm trying to work down the list of things you raised to me, and that's why I'm answering in succession.
Okay.
All right, so I want to answer the first one first. I'm not trying to rush anybody. You can stay here all day. To the second point about what is minority, if the state's involved in the building process, then the word minority is going to be black business also, because we just had a study come back talking about the fact that the state spent $64 billion $64 billion with minority businesses, and only 24 were black. So this happened last week in a meeting that you all may not have seen. It was a group called TASSER that I'm sitting on with Antonio Parkinson, trying to make sure we have more black businesses at the table for the state. So when I say that, I mean black businesses.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's clear, because you know white women are minorities.
I'm trying to work down through the questions. Okay, I'm trying to work down through your questions. All right. So that's what the definition we have. All right, we're working with. But there are other minorities also that need to be respected, like veterans are minorities. All right, so they need to be respected also. All right. Are there any more questions before we go? Oh, no, one more part. So who made these up? Here's the challenge. If you come out here with nothing up there and folks say, well, what does a cap look like? I would like to see what other cities did, and there's nothing up there. You have no concept unless you've gone online and seen what a cap looks like. So this does not mean you have to choose it. It's just saying this is what other folks have used. But if you don't see anything that you particularly like, you can go there and you can design something that is not up there.
Okay. So these were examples from other cities that were successful in having caps.
And other ideas about how, yes.
So these are actual ideas from other cities that have caps.
Some are.
Okay, but others have been created by someone else that was at the table to say this may be an idea.
None were created. What we did is we just tried to get stock photos. As the Representative Love said, we used ones that are actually representative of other cities that have caps and cap structures or considering them, and have got some of these ideas out there as well. But it was just a matter of taking some photos of the kinds of things that were represented. For example, an amphitheater. If you wanted to have an amphitheater, if you wanted the cap and you wanted to have an amphitheater, do you want it to look like this? If you don't want an amphitheater, no problem, just skip that. Got it. So skip that. But then there's all these ideas. It's just intended to generate thought and idea, and also to make sure that if we didn't put a photo up there from someplace else or just a stock photo that does generate an idea for you, then please tell us what you see. It's intentional to be wide open, and we heard you very clearly about the minority representation in the development of this. Thank you. So we can get everybody started.
Councilman Ed Kendall has a statement to make or a question to ask. He wants a statement and a question. All right.
Unfortunately, I'm probably one of the few people here who was here when they first promised a deck across there. They called it a deck then. I remember when your father was living. My parents lived on Jefferson Street, and they were fortunate to get $10,000 for their property. That's a lot of money, I guess. But anyway, one of the questions my question was, you said this is going to be publicly owned. So how does that help generational wealth? In other words, how does that help us reestablishing business? See, when I grew up on Jefferson Street, we had drugstores, we had all kinds of businesses, and it evolved into that out of necessity. But we had wealth. I mean, we were kind of the Nashville little Wall Street. So how does this help us in terms of black businesses, ownership, and that kind of thing? Because if there's going to be no development by private developers, that also excludes us.
The physical land that the cap is on is public space. There's a convention center downtown. Public space. But because it's there, it draws private business and allows those who have businesses there to pass on generational wealth. If you put something there, if the community decides they want to put something there, like a small performing arts center that's publicly owned, where the Jubilee Singers could perform, now you create traffic for people who want to come there and hear them perform, and those who own businesses on Jefferson Street or want to build a business on Jefferson Street will benefit from that traffic.
So what about food courts and things like that?
Those things can be built by people, but this is what we go and design. Everybody go and design and decide what you want to have there.
One of the things I think he has already left, but Courtney Pogue was here earlier. Is he here? There you are. We're going to be working closely with Courtney as a part of community and economic development with this project. He's one of the Metro team that will be a team partner on this. And so those kinds of questions, I wouldn't want to tell you that we have all the answers for you today. We don't. And that's why we spend the next few months hearing your questions and making sure that we give good, clear, and honest answers to everything. So we don't have all the answers today, but we hear that's a question, and because there are things we do have to work around because of it being a public space. But we can put that question in the hopper, make sure we get back with a good, clear question, but know that we'll be working closely with economic and community development with alignment to create opportunities that can be leveraged off of a cap if you decide you want a cap. Did you want to say anything?
Good afternoon. My name is Courtney Pogue. I'm the Director of Economic Community Development for Metropolitan Nashville. So in regards to looking at equity and inclusion relates to capital, we're going to look at creating our first plan for the city. Nashville is a top 30 city. It is one of only 30 cities that has never had a true economic development strategy or plan. We have a plan at the chamber level, the regional level, but as we craft the plan based upon inclusion and equity and employment of capital for small businesses, both currently and forthcoming, that would be the first time we've ever done that. And workforce development to make sure people, those considered hard to employ, formerly incarcerated, opportunity youth, 16 to 24, those who come from single-parent households, those who lack transportation and daycare. To make sure a plan that's realistic and inclusive, but really has your input and your involvement in that plan. So I'm not going to push it down upon you. It'll be your plan with your involvement coming forward. So in the next 6 to 9 months, we hope to kick that off and bring that to you and have you involved in every step of the way. So thank you.
It was infrastructure funding that was set aside for the grant. I think that match was committed towards this grant, but any consideration of repurposing that funding otherwise would have to go through our budgeting process and so forth. And it's a multi-year funding commitment as well. It's not a single-year funding commitment. Yes. Yeah, come on up and ask your question here, because I don't think we can hear you. Thank you.
I think we understand how we all got here. And one of the questions that I have and I've heard is, has there been any consideration as to what healing means and what healing looks like? Healing has been used to define this is what they're trying to do with bringing us the cap. But when you look at what has happened to create the interstate, I don't know if there's equity there, you know, and that's my question. You know, what's the definition of healing for a community like Councilman Kendall has eloquently stated, has been stripped of wealth, economic opportunity, and I do understand that jobs could come with the cap, but bringing jobs that are temporary is a lot different from having the prospects of generational wealth and economic stability stripped away from you.
I think that's a great point, and we want to reiterate what healing is what healing means to you. And that's why we want to hear from you today through the course of this meeting and through the activities at the tables around the outside of the meeting site, as well as over the coming months in the meetings, the community meetings, the stakeholder meetings, the oral histories, all of those opportunities that you will have to state exactly what do you think healing is. Yes, ma'am. And I think after this question, we're going to let everybody get started, and we will be around to answer questions with you as well. Yes, ma'am.
Hey everybody, Odessa Kelly, Executive Director of Stand Up Nashville. I just had a question about procurement and what role procurement will play in regards to what former Councilman Kendall was speaking to the same thing that Representative Love was talking about with the equality of people being included in it, and also speaking to what Councilwoman Sharon Hurt was talking about. You know, like someone just said, there's going to be a lot of jobs. How many jobs are going to be created? Who's going to maintain them, and who's going to get those jobs? Because just to be honest, there are people in this room who have been fighting against us for years, as we could have been and gotten a lot of these things done. So now they're here patronizing us with this one event, and they're missing the point of that there's a lot of harm and a lot of undergirding things that can happen with this, and we want to make sure that all these things are answered before we go forward with the cap. So with regards to what everyone is coming up here and saying, not to repeat that, I would like to know what role will procurement play, because if it is going to be public property, then aren't those in procurement the department that gives out the jobs, it gives out the contracts, and gives out, and that's how we build wealth usually within the urban core of a city.
No doubt, if we do move forward, if the community decides that you want to move forward with a cap, the procurement and the actual construction activity of the project will be in the public space. It is a community public. It will be a community public activity, and we will have the opportunity to set the DBE goals for those projects, to work with contractors in terms of the labor force that is brought forward for both construction and so forth. And again, it's not going to be, though, any one entity. It's everything is very much a partnership of different parts. And as I stated earlier, I think today I can't, we would be wrong to tell you we have every answer very precisely today, but that doesn't mean that you won't have all the answers by the time we get to a decision point of do we move forward or not. So we're going to be working on that. I appreciate you bringing that up. That is something that has been top of mind for us in a lot of the transportation plan activities as well, and we are working on that. So thank you very much. And I know that some of you, especially you folks over here, are probably a bit warm at this point. We're gonna, we got water if you need some water, and we're gonna let everybody start moving around the circle if you would like. Or I am glad to, I'll stay over near one of the tables and glad to talk to anybody that just has other questions and just wants to talk a bit. So thank you all very much.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.